Handouts, they're on the website on the information page. Yep, already there. And you'll be able to turn to the next slide for me? Yeah.
All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming or viewing online our now FY25 Budget Information session. Today is Monday, June 17th, if you can believe that already. The weather is beautiful, so I thank you for being here instead of being somewhere else where you'd be enjoying the weather a little bit more. We've got a lot of information to share tonight. We're going to try and do it quickly so that we have plenty of time in order to answer your questions. There are 2 handouts. If you haven't gotten them, they're over here on the table. For those people that are with us remotely, those handouts are available on the town website. If you click on the Budget Information tab up at the top, you'll be able to see the 2 handouts. There's one that is a informational guide from the Finance Committee and the Select Board, and the other one is a quick reference tool that you can use just for quick hit information about the override. Our town administrator, Heather Monroe, is here, who is going to give our presentation to begin with, and then we'll have some opportunity for questions and answers at the end. I'd ask you to hold your questions for now until the end of the presentation, just so we can make sure we get through all of the information. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you, everyone, for coming this evening. Thanks for everyone tuning in online, those watching on YouTube, and those definitely who will be watching us at a later date and time. Next slide, please. Okay. So before we get started, a couple important dates. The first is the special town election, which is Monday, June 24th, and the second is the special town meeting on Tuesday, June 27th. On Thursday. Thursday, June 27th. Thank you. So first we have the special town election, which is on Monday, June 24th, and it's from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. It's going to be at the Paxton Center School in the gymnasium. There is one question on the ballot, you will see. It is the question 1, Prop 2.5 override. The language is specific and it's on the board here. It is, shall the town of Paxton be allowed to assess an additional $950,000 in real estate and personal property taxes for the purposes of funding the operating budget of the town for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2024. If this is approved, this vote would allow the town to use an additional, or assess an additional $950,000, provided that these funds are appropriated at the next town meeting. The special town meeting is scheduled for Thursday, June 27th, so 3 days after the override. It's for 7 p.m. at the Paxton Center School. This time, please know it's also in the gymnasium this time. The special town meeting will have 5 warrant articles on it. In the event that the override is successful, we'll be taking up Articles 1 through 4. If the override is not successful, we'll be addressing Articles 1 and Articles 5. And we'll cover those in detail a little bit later on. But first, we're going to do the override, the basics. What is an override? So in Massachusetts, an override essentially is to approve additional funding beyond the standard budget limits. In this case, specifically for the town's operating budget for FY25, becomes a permanent part of the levy limit, increases by 2.5% each year. In order to get an override to pass, you need 2 pieces. One is the referendum, which is the question at the ballot to be approved, and the second is the appropriation, or the town funding article at town meeting to be approved. Why does the town need an override? Paxton has an operating budget gap currently of $835,500 for FY25, despite its use of one-time revenues, including free cash, ambulance receipts, limited revenue growth, and rising expenses such as insurance, dispatch, contracts. We are unable to balance everything, so the operating budget override would allow us to maintain the essential services and bridge the financial shortfall. Didn't the town already pass a budget at annual town meeting in May? We did. The approved budget, though, was relying on the override approval or the additional revenues that would come in from that. It was contingent upon those numbers, and because that did not pass, we need to modify our total budget number to be able to balance everything out, which is why there's a lower number for consideration at the special town election at the ballot on Monday. Why does the town have two budgets on the special town meeting warrant? Well, we have two. One is under Article 2 and one is Article 5. Article 2 is the level services budget. This is providing the same services in FY25 as you're currently receiving in today, with a few exceptions, including funding the cost of guardrails, MS4 compliance, and IT infrastructure. And to do so, the budget requires $835,500 more than what the town currently has available in funds. Article 5 is a reduced services budget, so it's using everything we have, which includes having to reduce our current level services budget by $835,500 to be able to balance. What are the major differences in the Article 2 or level services budget versus Article 5, the reduced services budget? As we stated before, the level services budget Article 2 provides the same everything as in FY24 with those three exceptions. So there's no new staff, there's no new initiatives, no new programs. And the FY25 reduced services budget or Article 5 has a reduction in those services to be able to balance the current finances. What is the tax impact? So the estimated assessed value for the average single-family parcel right now is $459,020. In FY24, that's the tax rate of $16.07, or the average tax bill of $7,376. The override impact would be changing the estimated tax rate to about $17.28. Average tax bill of $7,931, which is a difference of about $555. And all of this information, I believe there's a little caption of it on one of the handouts, but you can also find it on the town's website. You can go to it, it actually breaks out all the different estimated single-family assessed values, and there's also a link on there that if you want to go to the town's page and you're not sure what your assessed value is, you can look that up. Or you can check with me afterwards, or give me a call, or the assessor's office, and we can help you figure those numbers out if you're interested. Special town meeting, so the articles. So as we talked about a little bit earlier, there are 5 articles on the special town meeting. The first article has to do with rescinding the vote of Article 17 that we had on the annual town meeting. If you remember, and you were able to come to annual town meeting, that was our budget article that was relying on an override of a larger amount. Because that override did not subsequently pass, we did not end up having a balanced budget or the numbers working out. So because we have a lower amount before an override, and potentially if the override doesn't pass, we'll have to do something different. All this article does is just clean everything up so that the Article 17 at the annual town meeting essentially goes away and we start fresh with this town meeting. Article 2 is the override question. So this one we will be taking up if the override passes on Monday, June 24th. And this article is very similar to what you saw at the annual town meeting and breaks out all the numbers for you. So it includes the raise and appropriate number, which is the first number you see there of $6 million and some change. And $400,000 in ambulance receipts reserved for appropriation, along with $394,000 from free cash, and an additional $950,000 from the override. This is like a horrible angle to see that, just in case anyone's wondering. This article, so if this article passes, again, we'll only take this article up if the town election override question passes on Monday, then this question will be taken up, and then we'll have a successful override with both a referendum at the ballot as well as the appropriation at the article. So Article 3 and 4 go along with Article 2. So one of the conversations that's been happening for quite a few weeks at this point between the Select Board and the Finance Committee is that what they'd like to do is reduce, in the event that the override passes, reduce reliance on free cash by $114,500. So if you noticed in that last article, the amount was less than what we currently have fully available for free cash. It came out to, I think it was like $394 or something. In the last article, this appropriates the other $114,500 that would be freed up from the override, and it reduces it 50% into operating stabilization, which is Article 3, and 50% into capital stabilization, which is Article 4, and the amount of $57,250. If some folks may remember, back at the annual town meeting last year, we actually ended up appropriating $80-something thousand from our operating stabilization account to be able to fund last year's deficit. We've also used quite a bit of what we currently have in capital stabilization. So this article would replenish operating stabilization to the tune of the $57,250, and Article 4 would do the same thing with capital stabilization. So Article 5 is the article we would take up if the override is unsuccessful on Monday, June 24th. And this article, again, uses everything we have. So there's no additional stabilization transfers related to this article. It is just very basic, 100% what we have going on here. So you see the initial transfer of raise and appropriate number, which is lower than what you saw before. You also see $400,000 from ambulance receipts reserved. In this case, it's 100% of what we have available for free cash, $509,482, and then it gives you the total budget number of $7 million and some change. So if this budget article is taken up and this article passes, then we will have a reduced services budget that is balanced and ready to go for July 1st. Budget differences. So FY25 comparisons. So we're looking at the two different budget versions. As we talked about, we have Article 2 and Article 5. Article 2 is the override contingent or the level services budget. And this budget has a total town-only budget. I'm going to grab another mic. I can't. My neck's going to go sore. Okay, let's try it this way. All right, so Article 2, the override contingent level services budget, has a total town-only budget of $8,224,716. What's used in that? The revenues used is $394,982 of free cash, $400,000 of ambulance receipts reserved for appropriation, and an override in the amount of $950,000. As mentioned earlier, that would free up $114,500 in free cash, which will be appropriated into the stabilization accounts, reducing the town's reliance. It also reflects a level services from the FY24 budget. With no new programs or staff, with the exception of guardrails for safety, the unfunded mandate MS4 compliance by the state, and IT infrastructure. The Article 5 in comparison, this is the non-override contingent, so this is if the override fails on Monday. This is the reduced services budget. The total town-only budget, so again, town-only, not including the schools, is $7,389,216. The revenues used would be $509,482 of free cash, $400,000 of ambulance receipts. And it reflects $835,500 in budget cuts across all departments. So going now, we've talked a couple times in prior presentations, we generally hit on the 5 departments that would be most impacted in the event that an override is unsuccessful and we end up on the reduced services budget. So the first one, and these are very high level, we're happy to get into as many details as folks would like a little bit later, is the recreation department. So with the override, the town's portion of what we fund for recreation would be $32,707. This covers 67% of our recreation director's salary. And then there's a line that's a little much smaller than that, that is actually the portion we pay for her benefits. In addition to that, the revolving fund, which is funded by program user fees, covers the other 33% of the recreation director's salary currently, as well as her other benefits. So their portion of health insurance, retirement, and so forth. The revolving fund also currently covers user fee programs. You think basketball, after-school program, summer program. Also provides for free programs such as the Easter egg hunt, summer concert series, holiday tree lighting, etc. In the event that an override is unsuccessful,
How can I help you?
I don't know.
How can you help?
That.
Oh, thanks. In the event that the override is unsuccessful, the reduced services budget shows no budget for the recreation department. They would have to rely 100% on their revolving fund, which means they could increase. I'm sorry? Was there a question?
No.
Oh, okay. So with the revolving fund, so they'd have to rely 100% on the revolving fund, including any fees that they pull in from that, including perhaps increasing the cost of those programs to folks. It would put an additional strain on that fund. And even with those increased user fees, you're looking at the elimination of free programs, egg hunt, concert series, etc., and the ability to continue functioning will be limited to about 4 to 5 years before they're able to no longer self-sustain. The library, so in the override or the level services budget, the library is funded in the amount of $206,140. All the services, hours, staffing, programming, everything would be continued as they are today. In the event that the override's unsuccessful, the reduced services budget is in the amount of $194,092. It means there will be a reduction in the available funds for building repair, maintenance, supplies, purchase services, while staffing would remain the same. It would still cause additional issues, including putting the library in jeopardy of losing its state aid certification. In the event that the library does not have its state aid certification, members of the community of the town of Paxton are not able to use libraries in other communities, not able to share books, etc. DPW, so the override version of the DPW budget is $963,685. That includes $60,000 for guardrails for safety, which we've spoken about at a number of meetings that we're in dire need of, and $85,200 over last year's figures for MS4 continued compliance for the permitting requirements in year 6. Without the override, you're looking at a total budget for the DPW of $740,675. A reduction would result in reduced overtime coverage, limited ability for doing or no ability for doing weekend burials, elimination of line painting, reduced roads repair materials such as asphalt and tar, which would limit their ability to only being able to do repairs of cold patching during the winter, and in general. Reduction in funds to upkeep maintenance on vehicles and repairs, and putting the town out of compliance that we've worked so hard for MS4 permitting. Police. The override budget has police funded at $1,296,520. This is mostly due to contractual increases. Without an override, that would drop their budget down to $952,521. It's a reduction of staffing from 10 to 7 officers, resulting in 2 layoffs and 1 position that would be unfilled. They would be eliminating the school resource and traffic officer, unable to staff the overnight patrol, unable to continue community policing programs or provide officers with any specialized training. And it would be essentially have the department go from becoming a proactive department to simply a reactive one, responding to calls for service. The fire department is budgeted in the override version or the level services budget at $1,255,721. No operational changes other than general regular employee contractual obligations are included. Without the override, the amount would be $1,023,429. One of the major changes reflected here would be result in a reduction of staff by eliminating the part-time administrative assistant. We would be reducing by 2 full-time firefighters or EMT and up to 20 part-time and on-call firefighters. The staffing reduction would result in less ability to serve the community with 1 day staffed, with 1 paramedic and unable to transport, and 1 day unstaffed, an inability to meet NFPA and OSHA safe staffing requirements, and mutual aid would be required for most of our fire calls, and we would not have the ability to staff for a second call. So more information, as Julia mentioned earlier, is available on the FY25 budget page on the website. My contact information is there, as well as there's business cards over by the handouts if anyone would like to have a conversation or ask any additional questions. And with that, I think we're already on the questions piece. What I was thinking is anyone in the audience, if you want to raise your hand, we'll get you a microphone. Just say at least your first name so we know who we're talking to, and you can ask the question, and then after we go through everyone one round, we'll go online, see if there's any additional questions, and then we can circle back one more time. Does anyone have any questions in the audience? Robin?
I have 2. My
Okay.
first one is for DPW. If the override does not pass and we fall out of compliance for the stormwater, what happens? Are there fines that will be levied?
So there is the opportunity for fines to take place. My apologies, Travis Tebow, the Director of the Paxton Department of Public Works. There is the opportunity to be fined anywhere from the range of $2,500 to $25,000 a day out of compliance. In speaking with the town's consultants that we use to do all of the MS4 permit work, they have not seen any fines going out to any cities or towns thus far for MS4 permitting non-compliance to date. That doesn't mean it's not going to happen in the future, though.
Thanks, Robin. Any other questions in the audience?
I have one other one, but I can wait till everybody gets a
Okay.
chance.
There's a gentleman out back. Chief, do you have a microphone near you? Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
As long as it's on.
Hello? No, may not pertain to this, but I'm more curious as to, and Josh Rutro.
Thank you.
Yep. More goes to the votes that we had before, and it could be my misunderstanding of the ways of the towns, but why wasn't the school budget voted on the ballot, and it was just in the town, whatever the meeting was before that?
Yeah, I can take it. This is Julia Pingiatori, Chairman of the Board of Selectmen. So we opted, the problem with the school, right, is that it takes 4 towns to pass it, which means that more than one town has to disapprove it in order for it to not pass the school budget, right? At the time that we were formulating the initial warrant, we had, the information that we had available to us was that the school budget was expected to pass in all 5 towns. So what we were faced with was a situation where if we did 2 overrides, one for the school and one for the town, if the school override failed, then if there's no other town that votes it down, we're gonna get assessed that amount anyways. And so then the budget override for the town, even if it passed, would end up funding the school. So essentially what we ended up deciding to do was still give people the option so that they have the freedom of choice with the school by putting it on the town meeting warrant, separate from the school budget, separate from the town budget, but only the town budget went to the ballot referendum so that in the event that the budget failed, we're only working within our town means, and we're not trying to fund the school, essentially in that situation, with money that people wanted to fund town services. Does that make sense? It's very confusing.
No, I get what you said, but
Yeah.
why, was it just because people stood up and voted at that town meeting prior to the vote, that we didn't get to vote at it at the, because in my opinion, just like what we're having to do with our budget, that was, we were asking for 1.44, now we're down to 950.
Yeah.
Which, again, I like that. But the same with the school's got their budget, they're asking for everything. And we didn't get a chance. I mean, I get it, I wasn't at the meeting, so I
Yeah.
couldn't vote on it, so shame on me, I'll give you that. But we didn't get a chance to vote on it as a town, where we could look at the school and say to the school, hey, go back and like reconfigure some stuff and cut some budget a little bit, so it's a lot less of a burden.
Yeah, so the town meeting was your opportunity to do that. But again, it takes 2 towns to turn it down before they go back and reconfigure, right?
Didn't Sterling vote it down?
Sterling did vote it down, but of course, their meeting was the same night as our meeting, so we
Right.
wouldn't have had that information available to us ahead of time. Yeah. Did I answer that sufficiently?
Yes.
I know, it's not the answer you want to hear,
Not
but.
the answer I want. No, but thank you, I appreciate it, I'm not
Okay.
here to be a jerk, I'm just.
Yeah.
Are there any more?
Hi, my name is Katie. This may have been also covered in the town meeting that I regretfully did not attend. But because this would raise our taxes by 2.5% this year, as well as every year, was there consideration to increase taxes by 2.4%? So as not to get into Prop 2.5, but to also increase the money coming in.
Okay. Thanks, Katie. So that's a good question. A lot of people get really confused with Prop 2.5 and what it means. We heard a lot where folks are like, hey, it was adopted in 1980s and our taxes can only go up by 2.5%. But what 2.5% does is we take the amount of money, the total amount that we're able to take in each year from taxes, from real estate and personal property, plus the 2.5% the year before they grew by, plus the new growth, so anything that didn't make it onto the rosters in time and so forth. Put all those pieces together, take that sum, and we can increase that by 2.5% without asking the taxpayers each year. Your individual tax bill very unlikely goes up by 2.5% each year. What happens is it has to do with the assessed value, right? So sometimes, my property could be on this beautiful location, I could have a beautiful view, and all of a sudden things change and that property is valued more than the property that's on Pleasant Street. So my value for my property could go up, person on Pleasant Street value could go down, my taxes are gonna go up by more than 2.5%, their taxes could go up by less than 2.5% or any number in between. It has more to do with that total amount you can collect. It's not evenly dispersed throughout the board. So when we're looking at the amount taxes are going up, we're looking at, what do we actually need to make things work for our residents? What's in the best interest of the residents? And that's a conversation that the select board and the finance committee have spent a long part of this budget season discussing, and that's why the numbers for the override have changed over time, right? They're trying to figure out how do we get the best services for our residents with the most minimal impact. They understand, and I think we all understand that, having to pay more is hard and we don't always have the ability, and it's going to put people, especially some people, seniors in particular, often an impacted group, in a position where it's really a tough choice for them to have to make. So when doing this, none of us come to this table trying to make these decisions lightly. We put all the pieces together. But back to the 2.5% question, right? So that really just comes down to how the state does the math on that piece. And again, misconception with whether your taxes are going to go up by 2.5% or more or less. I hope that helps. Okay.
Do you want to talk about the overlay as well? Because we're taxing to our levy limit right now.
Yes.
And so, I don't think that there's an understanding that sometimes there can be a gap in your levy limit or some additional room in your levy limit, and that's what we're trying to create.
So some towns have the ability, and they have a little bit of flex, right? So you won't see them come to the table for an override as soon because they have more money that they can increase the taxes to that's already previously been approved by the taxpayer. Town of Paxton, for at least a decent period of the history, we've always taxed as high as we can, meaning we don't leave anything on the table. If there's taxes out there that are available for us to assess, we do that. Each year, we generally leave a little bit on the table. I think last year was about $6,000, and that simply has to do with the penny, the tax rate and the penny. Some years it's higher than 6,000, some years it's less than that, but it's doing a math that Division of Local Service has us do every year in the late fall, early winter. Okay. Before we do your second question, we're gonna grab,
I was just gonna see if I could reply to hers, real quick.
well, hold on to your reply. I think we have one more person in the audience, and then we'll grab online, because we wanna make sure we get to everyone. Yes. Do you have a microphone? You do not. Let's hook you up with a microphone.
I'm Trish Dawson. My question is, if the override doesn't pass, are the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee on board with exactly what you're proposing here is the cuts? Or is that still open for discussion?
So I would, Mark, do you wanna take that one? It looks like you're ready.
No, I'll follow you.
So this is the current proposals that we have were ones that we worked with all of the departments and myself, right? We spent a lot of time on this. We tried to figure out, reducing any services that weren't absolutely essential to have, anything we didn't need. And the cost, and I know FinCom did mention this a little bit at the last meeting, the cost could be anywhere from, a reduction of a department's budget by $50 up to $10,000 or $20,000 on average. And the reason being is some departments are really small, so we don't always have the ability to cut much, right? A good example, and I use it all the time, is the town accountant's office. We have one person in the town accountant's office. They work 20 hours a week. Even if we had no other employees, we would still have to pay bills for the town and follow all of the legally required paperwork. So we would still have to pay that person 20 hours a week. So we can't necessarily reduce the person's hours, but we can reduce, maybe we don't do as many trainings or as much compensation for mileage for things, and we do reductions that way. So that's how we tried to do it amongst all of the small departments, and we looked at things and said, do we actually need this? Are we legally required to do something or not? If we weren't, we pulled it. When we got to the rest of the departments, being DPW, PD, and fire, those are the largest departments in town, right? They're very people, right? The cost of the service is the people. It's not necessarily the supplies or paper, but the bulk of their department and what they do is provide services for all of us. When we got to those departments, we looked at FY24's budget numbers, FY24's budget numbers adjusted for any revenues that department brings in, FY25's numbers, adjusted all of them for an average, and then said, okay, well, whatever's left of the deficit that we can't cut anywhere else, we split amongst those three departments. So what we currently have on the table for the reduced services is with the notion that these departments can still function, not as well as what they currently are, but they could still keep the doors open and operate. That being said, Finance Committee is meeting tomorrow night to have some discussions to make sure everyone there is comfortable with all of the reductions, and they might have some follow-up questions. Is that summarized, Mark, or do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I was just going to say that the question was, have we approved those cuts? The answer is no. We're meeting tomorrow night at the John Bauer Senior Center at 7:30 to go over those. I certainly would want to go on record as saying we're not going to offer any additional cuts, but we may offer some different cuts, and want to defer to the committee to have an opportunity to talk about that and discuss that tomorrow evening.
So then will you then is it on? Yeah. So then will you publish what your new cuts are so that we can have the comparison to this information?
Yeah, I'm not sure that we would publish them, but we would certainly let them be known by way of communicating those to the town administrator, who will be present tomorrow evening, and by extension to the select board.
Can I raise my hand?
Yep, Fran, we can, let's just finish this one.
Is that not Mark talking, who chairs the finance committee?
That was Mark Love, yep.
All right, so Mark, you're telling us the finance committee does not have a position yet on the override vote?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that we don't have a position on the cuts if the override fails.
I would like to know if the finance committee supports or does not not support the override vote for next week?
We're voting on those particular warrant articles tomorrow evening.
All right, does the select board have a position yet?
The select board supports the override.
Okay, Mark, how will you publicize your votes tomorrow night?
Again, we don't have a vehicle to,
As an intelligent voter, my wife would say as a semi-intelligent voter, how can I know what the finance committee is recommending before I vote next week?
we don't have a vehicle to publicize it, but our meeting is going to be televised. It will be available to be viewed video on demand. We'll share the information with the town administrator, who by extension will share it with the select board.
Are you anticipating the select board vote will be different than what the finance committee recommends?
That's a tough question for me to answer. I don't want to get ahead of my colleague members on the finance committee.
So can you do something to let us know what the finance committee thinks before next week?
We'll make that recommendation following tomorrow evening's meeting, yes.
So,
Because we do not have a local daily newspaper like the Telegram used to be, how will we know what the finance committee is gonna recommend?
so Mark, just to clarify on that, so if I'm not mistaken, I believe at FinCom, you guys are in support of the override itself, correct?
Well, we were prepared to vote on 4 of the 5 articles at our last meeting, and decision was made not to take a vote because they, number 1, might change, and number 2, the articles had not been closed.
So, but even prior to that,
So everyone's asking me to speak.
Mark, when you said number 1, because they might change, what might change?
The numbers, if they are aired out with town council, there was a unlikely, but nevertheless a possibility that they could change, so conventional wisdom was to hold. And secondly, the articles had not been closed as of that date, which would have been premature to vote on articles that had not been technically closed. They were closed this past Monday.
but clarifying, Mark, so this FinCom, unless I'm mistaken, is in support of the ballot question on Monday, correct?
Well, you're asking me to take a position on the committee, and I'm saying that the committee has not met to formally vote.
So haven't we have the information sheet that Finance Committee voted on, which includes all the information in support of the override. FinCom and SB agreed together at the number of the override. I think the only piece, as I understand it, that's up for debate is the composition of the reduction of services, not even the balanced bottom number, but the composition of what that makes up.
Yeah, over a number of meetings, some of which were joint with the select board, the finance committee did work to arrive at the $950,000 override. Yes. But have they voted on the article which includes it? No, not yet.
All right, Julie, do we have anyone else online?
I have no hands raised that I can see. Online, sorry, not behind me.
Oh, there's no one else.
I don't see anybody online that's asking to speak. No.
Before we go on to the next question, Mark, you also have, or we also have, to the gentleman online, the Finance Committee website, so we can also put any updates on the votes for that and the FY25 budget page. Gentleman in the center. That'd be you.
Hi, I'm Chuck Putney, Ledyard Road, 15-year resident, proud resident of Paxton. I have a comment before I get into my question. One of the frustrating things for me in this process is it doesn't seem like the Select Board and the Finance Committee have been on the same page. So it was frustrating to arrive at town meeting to see that Select Board had taken a position, to see that Finance Committee was going to announce it there, and then they announced something different. And I think that's confusing for residents, and it's frustrating for residents. And then to also hear that there's cuts that have been proposed, that people have been discussing, that people have been preparing for, and now we're hearing that Finance Committee might change those cuts. I think that's just frustrating as a resident, as people who are involved on town committees. It's frustrating for me. And my real question. So I served on rec for many years. I'm very passionate about rec, and I was surprised by the number of cuts not the number of cuts, but how impacted rec would be. Because I think rec has done a really good job. I think for years the goal has been to be zero funded and still be able to manage, to offer services. And I feel like we're pretty much there, if not close. So I was surprised to see that the number of like the immediate cancellation of programs and all that stuff, because it does feel like we're close. I mean, the strength of the revolving fund, how that grows each year, and if we're just dealing with the elimination of the 32,000, it seems like we're relatively close to be able to still fund the programs. So it doesn't seem like the math adds up to me, right? Because it seems like we can sustain our programs, maybe minor cuts, maybe with I don't know. So I was surprised at how much rec programs would be cut. So I don't know if there's an explanation of that.
Want me to take it? I got this one too. Good, great. I got three. As well I should. So the problem is the gap that we're. Who are you? Oh, sorry. My name is Jeff Cormier, Chairman of the Recreation Commission. The problem is the gap between point A and point B. So right now we have approximately $200,000 in our revolving fund.
240.
240.
In April it was 240.
Yeah, okay. And so going from our portion of what Kathy, the recreation director's salary is, to having to, the number that Heather gave was actually not including the benefits. And so including the benefits, that's just under $40,000. And so if we were to keep the programs that are free and that we break even on, or the programs that we actually do lose money on, because we don't make any money on like tree lighting and things like that. So if we were to keep that and then take an annual hit of $40,000, in the past couple of years, we've only been able to increase the revolving fund by about $10,000 to $14,000 every year. So then that means that $240,000 needs to support the additional almost $40,000 every year. So if you think about
Wouldn't that be 25,000?
No,
So it's 40,000.
it's
But then
including,
you're running 15,000 beyond that, right?
Yeah.
If it's growing by 15,000 every year, right? Wouldn't that 15,000?
well, 10 to 14.
Okay.
So call it average, the 13, right? And so 13, so if you offset the $40,000 by $13,000, you're still left with $27,000. That gets pulled out of the revolving fund every year. The programs that we're having to cancel because they lose money, don't make money, we're gonna have the time where the expenditure of that $240,000 by the $27,000 isn't gonna be a long time. And so in order to stop the outflow of cash and really only focus on keeping the recreation open as long as possible, I really need to ensure our activities are helping to support that $27,000 gap.
Okay, are there any other questions? All the way in the back. You remember your question, don't you?
It's not really a question, but you asked about the 2.4 versus the 2.5% increase. From my understanding, it was a meeting earlier, I don't know, a month or two ago, where when it was the 1.44 million. It's the question of the 2.5 override is whether or not they can ask for 2.5 or more. So when it was the 1.44 million that we were asking for, it was, the Finance Committee can correct me if I'm wrong, it was a 14.5% increase. Not a 2.6% increase, it was 14.5% increase. So there's a big difference from the 2.5. The 2.5 override is just to be able to ask for more than 2.5. I don't know what it is at the 950, and I could be off with the 14.5%, but we were sitting here, one of the guys, he's a whiz, he did the math out, and he said it was a 14.5% increase. So at the 950, it might be like an 8 or 9%. I'm not a mathematician, but so I was just trying to.
Robin?
This is a question for Mark Lowe. Well, actually, and Cable and you. So Finance Committee is meeting tomorrow night at 7:30 at the COA. Why are you not meeting in here so that the meeting can be live streamed on YouTube? Because right now, there are approximately 3,800 households in town with less than 1,000, I believe, according to the last cable report, that have access to the Spectrum, cable, charter, channel 192, whereas everybody who has an internet connection can access YouTube.
At the time the meeting notice was posted, this room was not available.
I'm surprised for being such an important topic right now that you wouldn't want to try and maximize and do everything humanly possible so that every resident that has voting power can have access. And live streaming YouTube is, I mean, it's a no-brainer. That's shocking. Okay, so there's that. I have one other question if no one else has a question.
Does anyone else have any additional questions in the room, sir? Oh, we need a remote.
You can take one of mine.
Oh, now you got 3, look at that.
Gary Goldberg, Cutler Road. More just a comment. I know Chuck made the comment about the Finance Committee and the Select Board being on the same page. You know, the document that you handed out tonight has both of you guys on there. So it comes as a surprise to hear that you may not be on the same page, assuming you both created the document. So that level of discord at the town meeting is not the best look. And to have it now come out again that it's still a concern is still not a good look.
Gary, thank you. Until tonight, it was my understanding that we were on the same page. So I'm also a little surprised to hear that things may be changing, or that nobody wants to say from the Finance Committee that they support the override, because it was my understanding that that was the case. So I'm hopeful that when they meet tomorrow night that we will see that there is support for the override, and it's just a matter of semantics for tonight.
Yeah, let me clarify something. I just saw this informational guide with both signatures. I'll go a step further. The Finance Committee drafted that. We are in support of, and by the way, the informational guide is exactly the same information that Heather presented to you this evening. So in that regard, we worked together to arrive at the $950,000 override. What I am saying is the Finance Committee has not officially taken a vote, and they will not do so until tomorrow evening. I don't want to speculate how that vote is going to go, because I need to be fair to my members who are going to be there that evening tomorrow night. I don't even want to speculate, but I will say that, yeah, we did write this. We fought against some edits being made to it. And I think if you were to compare this with the slides that Heather shared this evening, it's exactly the same. We were champions for money going into the stabilization funds, both the general stabilization and the capital stabilization. So in that regard, we're not far apart at all. What I am saying is we have not taken votes. Chuck also made mention that now he's hearing we may make some changes tomorrow night. I'm not.
You said that.
No, I'm saying that we may offer, I didn't say we were going to. I'm saying we're going to be looking at it for the first time in the detail that we need to look at it tomorrow evening. And the committee members were given the information on Friday. We're meeting on Tuesday. We haven't spoken. We can't speak until such time as we meet tomorrow night. There could be no changes. It could be accepted exactly as presented, or a committee member may have a suggestion or two. So I don't want you to think that we're not working together, or that we're changing the rules or moving the goalposts. That's not the case at all. All I'm saying is no official vote has been taken, and I don't want to speak on behalf of the committee until they take that vote. I think you'll understand that. I think that's fair.
Well, I'm surprised you haven't looked at it in detail, because I think these cuts have been discussed since April, right, for a couple months, at least 2 months.
The macro cuts have been discussed for a long time, you're right. And we have the detail on Friday, and we're going for our Tuesday meeting.
And I do know it makes it tough on town boards, because I know I have friends who are on like the library committee, so to speak, and now they've been working hard, and now they feel like they need to go tomorrow to make their case again, because it seems like the changes to the cuts are on the table again. So I think it makes and you did move the goalpost at the town meeting, which again was relatively frustrating. So I think people are nervous, and people who volunteer for the town, who work to provide services for the town, are trying to do their best. And I think it's just the whole process has been challenging.
Well, Chuck, I'm going to pick you up on moving the goalpost. We've been on record from day one of being totally opposed to the $1,440,000 override, without exception. We were always opposed to that.
Because I thought in the town warrant it said that finance committee would make their recommendation at town meeting.
And we did. We made a recommendation for $1,150,000.
But then why wouldn't, I would expect at the town meeting, when on that article, because it was a recommendation on that article, I would expect that, wouldn't it have been, we opposed the article?
We did. When it was held to vote, we opposed it.
But was that in the
Voted-
town warrant? Because I remember looking at the handout in the town warrant.
We voted against it at town meeting, and we were against it 2 months before town meeting.
And was that reflected in the warrant? Because I remember seeing in the warrant that you know how they have the
We-
each warrant. And
we
then they
don't
have
write the warrant.
Finance committee either recommends or opposes, and,
Yeah.
and select board, I think select board recommended, and I thought there was uncertainty in that statement from the finance committee.
None. We opposed it. The select board writes the articles. Our only jurisdiction is to vote approval or disapproval. And we voted disapproval. For the $1,440,000. What is now before us this evening and next week at the ballot is a different story. And we did work with the select board to arrive at the 950. But I'm
Can I make a suggestion? Can I make a suggestion?
Go for it.
We are a small town, less than 5,000 people. We rely on volunteers like Mark Love, like Julie, like everyone on the select board to make our recommendations to us. There's no reason for us to get into a fight with each other tonight. How about we just wait until what the finance committee decides tomorrow night, let their recommendation be made known, and when we come together on Thursday or Friday or Saturday or even Sunday of next week before we vote next Monday, and just reconvene and try to just get this thing resolved. I mean, we are not Boston, we are not New York City, we're not even Worcester. So we rely on volunteers. I mean, I did the moderator's position for 15 years, and I understand what it takes to make this town work. Everybody here is a good person. Everybody here has the best interest of the town of Paxton at heart. So why don't we just all wait till what happens tomorrow night with the finance committee, let Mark report back to us, and we just vote on Monday. I mean, I guess without tipping my hand, I am tipping my hand, I'm prepared to vote for the override next week because I trust the people who run the town. So why don't we hear what the finance committee says this week, and then just make a vote next week?
Okay. Is there anyone else at home who would like to speak? If you want to turn your camera on or unmute yourself or raise your hand so I can see. Having no one else at home, anyone else, final questions? Hold on, there might be someone.
Celtic. Celtic.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Val Warren, we live on Old Lantern Circle.
Val, let's get you a mic, can you,
I'm pretty loud.
you are, but people at home are gonna make your great comments.
Very loud anyway. I just have a question on the math on this.
Sure.
Okay, we've lived here 12 years. Every year we watch the tax bill go up over at least $500 a year.
Yeah.
Now, this 555, is that in addition to the annual $500 increase? Which would make it a $1,000 increase per year?
So it's all gonna depend on a few things, one of them being what your average assessed value is. So we can check that out afterwards if you're interested and figure out what the impact would be. This is the impact as the tax rate is currently today with all the numbers as they are today, right? Each year, it does end up going up. So that
Each year
would
it
be
goes
the
up,
impact if the number was today. Next year, the number likely, you have the normal increase, and then this is above the normal increase piece.
So the normal increase has been averaging about $500 per year.
For your property.
We're paying over $8,000 for a two-bedroom house on a half-acre lot. So this increase is in addition to the $500 we pay every year? which
So,
would make it
I-
over 1,100?
I would say we'd have to look at your specific, every property is gonna be a little bit different with what the assessed value is, and we can even find the history of what your tax bill has been for the past couple of years, and try to figure out, on average, what those numbers go up by, and then what this has. You have to remember, there's lots of factors that go into a tax bill which make it hard to calculate on a whim, right? So in addition to just the normal 2.5%, you also have things that the town votes for that are either a one-time piece or something that happens and eventually it runs out, right? So an example, we have debt service that we do with the school, right? We have school debt service. Last year, the town's excluded debt for that was $220,000. So that $220,000 was split amongst all the parcels in town. This year, it's only $88,000. Right? So that piece alone comes down. So theoretically speaking, that number has reduced on your piece. Some numbers stay stagnant, and then the bulk of it, like you said, goes up 2.5% each year. But we'd have to look at your individual tax bill to take a look, because everyone's gonna be impacted different. And I wouldn't wanna say to folks, yes, your bill's gonna go up by that amount, because their bill may not be that amount in the first place, right? Like, you have to figure out what the average assessed value is. So for the home, that, what did we say, was about $249,000. For the average, you're looking at an impact of about $555,000 in new taxes.
So that's an additional to the increase that you get every year. So technically, you could go up $500 to $1,000 on your tax bill.
Val, it is on top of the normal increase that you would see to your taxes every year. What I think Heather's trying to say is that for each individual property, that may be different. If you have seen $500 a year in increase and you expect that again this year, then that may be on top of what you see this year. But the only way to know that would be to look at your assessed value and then calculate it from there.
So potentially, it could be a $1,000 increase. Could be. Potentially.
I think the potential is there. I think that's unlikely, but I can't say it's not possible.
That's unsustainable for retirees.
You may feel that way.
It is.
Everybody's situation is different. Yes, and you're entitled to your opinion as well.
I'm Duncan. I'm with her.
You're with her.
Yeah. But question on the language. The very bottom line of the informational guide says $556 for the first year.
Right.
What's the implication of that for the first year?
So I would defer to Mark because he drafted that document, but I'll tell you that an override, once it's put into place, it doesn't go away, right? It's a permanent fixture. And so for the first year, you'd see that $555 on the average single-family home. That number would then go up by 2.5% for the following year. Okay.
So that does not go away.
It does not go away. Nope, this is different than, say, a capital override.
It keeps compounding.
It does stay every year.
It
Yep.
just keeps compounding.
So for $10 a week, you get to live in Paxton, Massachusetts instead of other towns. I'll pay the $10 a week every day of the year, every single day, every single week of the year.
Okay.
Okay. Bill Trotter, I have a question for Heather.
Sure,
You
Bill.
did a little synopsis. I wasn't a little sure what you're talking about.
Okay.
Did you say that you could tax above 2.5%? I thought that state law said that was the ceiling.
So Prop 2.5 is a law that came out in the 1980s. What Prop 2.5 says is the tax levy, the three numbers up top, right? So your total tax amount of real estate and personal property tax, along with a 2.5% increase from the year before, along with your new growth. You add all those numbers up from the year before, and you add 2.5% on that. If a
Okay.
town wants to go above that 2.5%, we have to go to the taxpayer and say, hey, we want to add to that base number and make it larger, and get permission. That's what we're doing.
So
We're
that's the
asking the
override.
taxpayer, that's the
And it said above
override.
2.5 is the overrides. So
Anything.
2.5 is the base, the override, you put it together, and that's your real tax bill.
That becomes your new base.
Okay.
And then that base altogether adds 2.5% next year. And then those numbers add
I
into
just
new
wanted to
growth,
clarify that,
2.5%.
because I thought that
next year.
myself. One other quick question for the
Yeah.
fire chief. Although it's not on the paper, it was on the screen. It said unable to transport Could you explain that, please?
So, looking at these cuts, we're probably going to have to stop ambulance service for 1 day a week. Another day during that week, because it runs on a rotating schedule the way we staff, may only be staffed with one person. So one person, we wouldn't be able to transport it all. We'd have to wait for a mutual aid ambulance to come in either day to do the transport.
Okay, so let me ask you this question.
Yep.
If you had a paramedic working on the ambulance.
Yep.
They responded to a call. A cruiser shows up.
Yep.
The police officer cannot drive the ambulance to the hospital?
No, it has to be 2 staffed EMS personnel.
I thought they changed that law.
They did only for basic level services. We are an ALS level service.
All right, 'cause
Yeah.
I remember the problem we had with that before. Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Yeah.
All right, we have a question at home, Roberta?
Hi, thanks, Heather. I'm not sure that I'm going to offer much technical input, but I do think like this is an opportunity for the town and the citizens to really right size itself. I've seen a lot of comments about how we compare to other communities with similar residential, similar commercial tax base, knowing that, you know, we have a flat, a single rate. I don't think anyone here is pointing a finger at any of the volunteers that have done their very good work here, or any of our police and fire to say that they're not doing good work. But I do think if we don't truly get our arms around this and come to some solution that's sustainable, we're going to be in the situation again next year. Because if I remember what the select board had said, was that for years, you know, there's been this concern about funding and no real change in our tax base that has made enough of a difference. I just feel like, and if I've missed this opportunity for the details, and it probably happened at the select board meetings, I apologize, but to really just take a look at our town holistically and ask, how do we make it more sustainable? Because it is very true that the residents pay a lot. We pay a lot to live in, I agree with Fran, a beautiful community, but there's only so many dollars to go around in our households, like there's only so many dollars to go around in the municipality. And while it is easier to take from a larger group, you know, of a municipality than our households, I just feel like if we don't take this opportunity to right size our community and really prioritize and try to figure out some other creative solutions that maybe we haven't had the chance to think of yet, take this next year to find some sustainable solutions, I fear we'll be back again on a beautiful summer night next year. That's all.
Thank you, Roberta. Anyone else at home? Final comments, questions?
I just want to say to Roberta, and I hope we're looking at a Celtics final a year from now.
Okay. All right, is there anyone else in the audience here? We're going to go with last comments. So Robin and then the gentleman in the back.
Really quick, is there anything left in ARPA? I'm on the town website right now, and the last document posted was from September 12th, 2022, and it looks like there is some money left in ARPA. Is that earmarked for something, or could we use that for, say, the permitting for stormwater management?
So there's not enough of it that's going to be left to resolve any of the issues that we currently have.
Yeah, and some of it is being reserved because part of having all of this ARPA money and being able to spend some of it is that we do have to have a federal audit done of the ARPA money at some point, and that costs money as well.
Yeah.
So some of that has been being put aside for that.
Okay. Do you plan on updating the ARPA documents?
We're
once
gonna-
things are done?
Yeah, we're still working with accounting right now to figure out which projects are still outstanding and wrapping up, so we'll go back before the select board in July.
Okay, because we're like 18 months past the last one.
Yeah, there hasn't been any changes.
Okay.
Nope. Okay, gentleman in the back?
So, just to go back to what the lady was talking about on the thing, this is for you, the select board, and for the finance committee. What are the thoughts on, are we gonna be back at the same point next year? Are we gonna be asking for another 2.5 override, or do we think this is our solution?
This is not our solution. 1.44 was our solution. 1.44 was the number that would get us to a position where we wouldn't be relying on one-time revenues to try to balance our budget. What's happening every year right now is that we're relying on free cash and ambulance receipts to balance our budget. What that does is it creates a structural deficit for the following year because you don't know that you're going to be able to get the same amount of either of those things, particularly the free cash. So what that 1.44 number did was it reduced our ambulance receipts number back to 300,000, which is what we've always been putting into the budget. And it also eliminated the use of free cash to balance the budget. If you look at other towns that are very financially stable don't rely on one-time revenues in order to balance their budget. It is a sign of a town that is having financial distress when they start relying on that. And we've been doing it for 20 years, probably longer than that, right? And so we've managed to sort of limp along for all of this time. And now with the costs and the inflation being what it is, costs have gone up so much tremendously more than what we've been able to sustain in the past that we've gotten to a breaking point now where we can no longer bridge that gap between cuts and one-time revenues. And so here we are.
Does the finance committee agree or disagree or have a thought on it? I'm not doubting you, Julie.
No.
Yeah, we hope not to be back next year with an override request.
So just so people, and I think it's on the supplemental handout as well, just a snapshot for folks. This isn't the first time we've had a deficit, right? If you look at last year, we actually started the budget season with about a $500,000 deficit or budget gap. We were able to add in more one-time revenues, do some substantial reductions, put in ARPA funds to offset costs and so forth. This year, we're just out of those additional options. So we didn't actually solve the problem, right? Last year, we had $500,000 deficit. We started this year with the same $500,000, and then we added to it and got us to $835,500. If we don't resolve it now, we're going to have next year the 835 plus additional, right? It's just going to keep growing until we try to start bridging the gap between those numbers.
Well, how do you close the gap, Heather?
Well, I think, Bill,
What's the game plan for the future?
I think, Bill, what the game plan was is, I think Julia brought it up, right, is we looked at an override that would actually start reducing the reliance on free cash, reduce the reliance on the ambulance receipts, try to reset everything so that it does bring that main number up top to a larger number. Bill, I'm sorry, but I think I would like an opportunity to respond, please.
You're not gonna have that money,
Okay.
okay? Well, that's something to think about the taxpayers, that without that ambulance running into Worcester, you're not gonna get the money. So it's a catch-22 for us,
It is.
Okay.
You're right.
no?
Okay, is there anyone else from the audience? Last comments? All right.
Was that Bill Trotter?
It
Was that
was.
Bill Trotter?
It was, Fran.
Come on, Bill. You spent your whole life in public service. You know what this is about.
Okay. What?
You're right, I lived through this.
Yeah,
When they demoted,
come
laid off and demoted. It was
No,
tough.
not laid off and demoted, laid off and promoted, all the, what, I mean, what are you doing? You know this game as well as anybody. What are you talking about?
Well, I think one of the things that Bill was trying to point out was that if we do reduce staffing for the ambulance and they're unable to transport, we're not going to be receiving the receipts for those ambulance transports. So we're actually losing money sort of twice, right, in that circumstance.
I get that, and Bill is a friend of mine, and I really like him as a friend of mine. But come on, Bill, you've been a police officer for the city of Worcester, you've been a deputy sheriff, you've been a, I mean, you know what this is all about. This is about taking care of people like you and me and everybody else.
You're right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, I think we've had a very successful evening tonight. Thank you so much. If anyone has any more questions, my business card's over there. You can always call, email, and information is on the website. Thank you, and don't forget to vote one way or the other on Monday, June 24th.